Hey there, Leslie here, and today I want to share with you a study that I'm really pretty excited about, which says that gray hair is reversible and that it's caused by stress. So here's the title of the study, and it comes from a team out of Columbia University. A few caveats. It was only 14 individuals. And it also came from what's called a preprint journal, which means it has not yet been peer reviewed. So, however, I'm still very excited. And the reason why is because this team from Columbia, with participation from one member from the dermatology department at the University of Manchester here in the UK, it's really star-studded. And they're no slouches academically. I also love that they're drawn from psychiatry, neurology, and dermatology. So I don't think that we should discredit them just because this has not yet been peer reviewed. All right, with those caveats out of the way, let me tell you a little bit about the study. So I mentioned that they had 14 individuals participate. They ranged in age from 9 to 39, both men and women, and they took them from different ethnic populations. They had Hispanics, African Americans, Asians, and Caucasians participate. So what they were looking for was evidence of gray hair in all of the participants, and they wanted to control them, to check them against controls who did not have evidence of gray hair. And like an earlier team at Harvard Med School, which published back at the end of 2019, they did come to the same conclusion that stress causes gray hair. Now, it depends on the type of stressor because you can have a variety of environmental stressors, and they can range from lack of sleep to stress, to nutritional deficiency, to lack of endocrine balance. And I've talked about a lot of these things. They don't go into that detail. They simply class them as environmental or endocrinological factors. But I've talked about a lot of them in my other videos, everything from H. pylori to nutritional deficiencies, to thyroid, lack of thyroid hormones. All of those things come together to put pressure, stress on the hair follicles. And what the team concluded was, unlike the Harvard team, which said that hair follicles have a shock when stress gets to them, the stem cells in the hair follicle can literally be sort of exploded or completely destroyed to the point of no return. They came to a very different conclusion, and they said that our hair is quite a lot like the rings of a tree, where I'm sure you all remember this from elementary school biology. When you look at a tree ring, you can actually see different stressors on the tree, whether that was a drought or maybe a flood, or perhaps even some kind of physical injury or scarring to the bark itself. But all of these things are recorded in the rings of the tree. And this Columbia team said it is exactly the same for our hair, which is quite fascinating because, as you know, from an Asian perspective, yes, you would look at the overall health of a person. You would look at things, outward signs like hair, skin, nails. You would look at the quality of, how their tongue looked, if there was a white coating on it or not, if there was any scalloping or anything like that. And those would all be external indicators of what was going on the inside. And you may remember this photo that I showed earlier of a mouse. This is the same mouse. All three are the same. This is before, after, and then even later. And you may remember that this mouse was genetically modified such that the common antibiotic, which is not a problem for humans, when that antibiotic doxycycline was administered to the mouse, it had mitochondrial failure. And when its mitochondria were impaired, it got wrinkles, it gained some weight, it lost its hair, and what hair it did have lost pigment. All right, so all the signs of aging are correlated with mitochondrial dysfunction. As soon as they got rid of the doxycycline, the mouse, its body shape was restored, as was its glossy coat. The wrinkles were also gone as well. So when I showed this picture before, I said, look, everyone should have hope, you know, no matter where you are right now. If this mouse can do it, it's possible that we can do it too. And indeed, that's what the team at Columbia have said. As a matter of fact, they have said, they actually looked at proteomics. I won't go into this. I've talked about proteomic markers in the video I did on autophagy. Basically, those are proteins and how they fold. But the takeaway here was, it says that after they studied hair of these 14 individuals very carefully under an electron microscope, also taking the hair and looking at the individual proteins and mitochondria in the hair, they concluded these converging novel proteomics data support a multifactorial etiology directly implicating metabolic changes in human hair graying. Metabolic changes, these are the same things that cause metabolic diseases like diabetes and heart disease. Moreover, given that metabolic pathways are rapidly and extensively remodeled by environmental and neuroendocrine factors, i.e., they naturally exhibit plasticity, that means reversibility, these data provided the first proteomic evidence that human hair graying could, by nature, be, at least in part, reversible. So I'll just show you that quote. And that is really pretty powerful. I mean, I've been telling you, I've been giving you examples from other studies, but you don't have to believe me, or you don't have to believe my own story. Just listen to this. This is quite exciting science. And the other thing that really fascinated me about it was that they said that in these individuals, they would notice that some people, just like the rings of trees, would have undergone stress, then would have had maybe a holiday, and then they went through stress again, and that this left stripes in their hair. In addition, they found a number of people who had hairs like this. So this is one that I happened to pluck out of my hairbrush. As you know, I'm 55 years old. If I am capable of doing this, in the past 6 months at 55, I think that's hopeful for a lot of people who are younger than I am. So as you can see, it is white at the bottom and it is dark at the where the hair bulb is here at the top. And I think this probably correlates with me really, I'd noticed a few gray hairs, and so I started taking more Hush-A-Woe. But this is exactly the same thing that the Columbia team noticed, was that based on different stressors, people were getting white hair, but then when the stressors removed, in my case, I did something to remove whatever that stress was, probably lack of something, maybe not enough glutathione, the hair went dark again. And as a matter of fact, they have some really interesting statistics on how quickly this can happen. Now, bear in mind that the youngest person in the study was 9 years old. So that's pretty young. 9-year-olds bounce back pretty quick. But for those of you who are 15 or 16 and have written to me about this problem, you're young too. You can do it as well. So the study said that they actually were able to observe gray hair reversal in 3 to 7 days. That was the fastest. Now, there's just got to be the 9-year-old, right? However, for those of us who are not 9 anymore, there's still hope, because the median time it took to reverse gray hair was 3 months. So there is that quote there. And you can see very clearly where it says The median time was 3 months. Now remember, these people are aged 9 to 39. But I've just shown you my own hair, age 55, right? It can be done. All right, the other thing that was so interesting was that they said that reversal or repigmentation may reflect the action of an as yet unknown local or systemic factor acting on the hair follicle and pigmentation within a time frame of days to weeks. That is a big clue for us. And it's something I haven't been sure of. I've generally told you that if you're going to, if you are unable to run blood tests and you want to try something out like B vitamin, then give it 6 months to really show a difference. But these folks are saying that actually you should be able to see a change within days to weeks, depending on age. So that's quite useful, very useful information. The other thing that they said was that gray hair tends to come in synchrony. So that's also on the same page, page 8. And what that means is that for those of you, I've got a lot of guys who write into me and they say they have only 2 gray hairs on their head, but their beard is completely white. That does seem to be a thing, that if you are going to get gray hair, you're probably going to get it in a localized area. However, the good news is that when you discover what stressor has causing the gray hair, and again, remember the stressors can be a deficiency or imbalance in nutrients, in hormones, in antioxidants, could be due to infection. Once you repair those things, and minerals, once you address those deficiencies, imbalances, or infections, those stressors, then everything will actually turn back to its original color again in synchrony. So it will happen together. You don't have to worry about it going back in patches. And I thought that was quite useful as well. Unsurprisingly, they discovered that a really bad environmental factor for gray hair was smoking. In addition, smoking and greater perceived life stress is associated with premature graying. Now, the reason I'm going to highlight this is because I have discovered, and you may have noticed this with your friends or maybe even in yourself, that a lot of people who smoke perceive that they are in a stressful or fearful situation. And I'm sorry about that click-clacking in the background. The dog has just entered. And so if you have ever seen a smoker get nervous, they will light up their cigarette as a way to breathe in, probably activate that vagus nerve by taking those deep breaths in, activating the parasympathetic nervous system to just calm them down and bring their stress levels down. And what's so interesting was they said this has to do with perception of stress. Now, I've actually been in conversations where people my age, boomers, have said about millennials, they're snowflakes. And that has actually really shocked me. The reason why the boomers have said the millennials were snowflakes is because the boomers felt the millennials had it relatively easy. That doesn't matter. All that matters is perception of stress. And so, in other words, what the boomers think is not relevant. Sorry, boomers. What is relevant is the perception of stress from the individual. No matter what their age, if they perceive stress, it is going to manifest in the body. And don't forget that we have, although we're all used to going to the pharmacy to get our drugs, our body actually is its own little pharmacy. And it can make chemicals that make us happy, joyful, engaged, or conversely, depressed, sad, grumpy, angry. And so if we perceive a stress, we are more likely to create, that little internal pharmacy is more likely to create stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. And I've said before, if your adrenal glands make a lot of cortisol to help you deal with stress, they're going to take away all your progesterone. If you don't have enough progesterone, you're not going to be sleepy at night. If you don't have enough progesterone, estrogen in both men and women will go crazy. For women, that can lead to something like PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. For guys, that can lead to man boobs or the muffin top around the middle. So perception of stress is really, really critical, and I'm so glad that they actually validated that in this paper. In addition, they said chronic psychosocial stress also precipitates telomere shortening, DNA methylation-based epigenetic age, as well as other biological age indicators in humans. Psychological factors can measurably influence human aging biology. Bottom line, stress sucks. You don't want it. We have got to do everything we can to keep stress at bay. And what I also thought was quite interesting was that they are, in effect, by saying that stress leads to premature gray hair and that it leads to telomere shortening and DNA methylation-based epigenetic age, they're linking them together. In other words, if you are getting gray hair, that probably also means that inside your telomeres are shortening. Now, the good news is that you can reverse them both. And I know individuals who have gone in, they've had their telomeres measured. That's a little bit controversial still, but they've had them measured, and then they have done interventions and they have reversed their telomere age such that their telomeres were long again. If you look at the work of Elizabeth Blackburn from the University of California at San Francisco, who used to run the Salk Institute in La Jolla, California, and she's a Nobel Prize winner as well, her work on telomerase, the enzyme that lengthens telomeres, and what she wrote in her book, The Telomere Effect, about how we can use meditation to lengthen our telomeres. Well, I kind of wonder if we could use meditation to also reverse our gray hair. It's an interesting thought, right? So that was quite fascinating to me. The other thing that they say is that gray hair is, no duh, progressive in nature. And that as we get older, basically think of it as a bucket. So all of those stressors are caught in a giant bucket. And we have a little hole at the bottom to let the water out. But the bucket collects it. And we don't want the bucket to ever overspill, because eventually, if it overspills, that leads to gray hair. That's what they call our threshold. Now, as we get older, the bucket, the little hole at the bottom, which is basically glutathione, catalase, other antioxidants, which are there to neutralize, say, hydrogen peroxide, which bleaches our hair from the inside out, that little hole that lets the water out gets smaller and smaller, whereas the stressors continue to accumulate. And so what they do say, though, is that if you are able to always make sure that your stressors never tip the bucket so that it overflows, you don't have to get gray hair. And this explains why there are actually 84-year-olds out there who don't have gray hair. Now, they are rare. They're rare. And I suppose I am sort of rare too at 55, but it's possible. And I think for everyone who wants to reverse their gray hair, that is quite useful. So here, very specifically, they say age-related graying is naturally reversible, at least temporarily, and may be acutely triggered by stressful life experiences, the removal of which can trigger reversal. Again, I'm going to show that to you. I've outlined that in red. I think it's just so important. Now, they say temporarily, at least temporarily, you can remove the gray hair. Well, what if you just keep making sure that those stressors never come back, that those nutritional deficiencies, those hormonal deficiencies, those infections, those mineral and antioxidant deficiencies never come back. Well, then, you don't have to get the white hair, and you don't have to get the telomere shortening either. The other thing they say is that, and this is really interesting, they say that basically white hairs are largely absent until the onset of graying past 20 years of age. Then they accumulate before finally reaching a plateau. Can you guess at what age we reach the plateau of gray hair? It's 100 years. So that is so interesting, right? 100 years. Can we deal with not having gray hair until we're 100? Yeah, I think so. I think that's actually possible. Now, the other cool thing that they did was they created a computational model. I'm not sure if I've talked to you all about systems biology before, but systems biology is basically where you look at something like the human heart and you say, rather than the rhythm of the heart rate being due to just one single factor, like say sodium or potassium, that it is actually due to multifactorial reasons, and that it depends on the system in which it exists. So the heart rate and how it beats would be dependent on what else is going on in the body. Now, I know that probably sounds logical, and it's a very Eastern way of looking at the body, but that's not actually a very popular, it's not really how it's taught. And I don't want to get too controversial, but basically this team at Columbia has taken a systems biology approach. This is what functional medicine does too. And they have created a mathematical model. They have computed exactly how gray hair happens in each of these 14 participants. They modeled taking the hairs of those participants. They used electron microscopes to look at the individual hairs. They took the hairs, they chopped them up, they measured the amount of proteins, the types of proteins, the amount of mitochondria in the gray hair, in the white hair, in the dark hair. And they then created a computational model in order to discover each individual's threshold age, or threshold, not age, but threshold situation at which they would turn gray. And they say that using this model, they can predict under which conditions your hair will go gray, and tantalizingly, that this might also help you reverse it. Now that is frankly the holy grail. I have no idea how much money is spent in the world on hair dye, but I think it's a ton. Just talking to all of my girlfriends during lockdown who have been saying on their Zoom calls, apologizing about their roots, or saying how unfair it is that certain states are able to get hair dye jobs done and other states aren't. The amount just must be, tens of billions, maybe even more. But what if you could predict it? What if you could say to someone, hey, you know what? If you don't get enough sleep, if you have too much stress at work, if you aren't eating enough broccoli, which has a ton of glutathione, if you aren't eating enough fermented tofu, which has spermidine, if you aren't actually avoiding stress in a really detrimental, emotionally abusive relationship, you're going to turn your hair gray under those conditions. Well, that's really useful, actionable information all around your lifestyle and how you can actually anticipate when it might go gray and act just as it happens to reverse it. So I really hope that you have enjoyed this study. I didn't go so deeply into it as I could have, but I hope that I brought the main points across to you, which are that gray hair is reversible, that stress is no friend, and that the body is miraculous. And if we only put it in the right circumstances, it can heal itself. Thanks so much for watching. As ever, if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below. I will do my best to answer them. It's starting to get hard. You guys are asking lots of questions. So I will do my best. And that Gray Hair Detective is about to be released probably next week, and the ebook as well. Thanks again so much for watching. Take care.